Dennis's question is, how do I know if my idea is patentable?
Okay, gosh, that's such a common question. How do I know if my idea is patentable? The first thing you need to do is check to see if it's in one of the 4 statutory classes that can be patented. And I know Gabby will be typing these into the chat room because I've been told as a professor for 20 plus years that my handwriting's not the best. This took a long time to write out, but the rest of it, I'm not going to take that long. So the 4 categories, the first one is a machine. So a machine. Second is an article of manufacture. And I'll just abbreviate, I'll just stop with article, but Gabby should have that in the chat room. The third category is a composition of matter. And then finally, and this is one that's getting a lot of traction and a lot of interest these days, and that's a process, also a method. So machine, article of manufacture, composition, or a process. So your idea has to fit within one of these 4 categories. If it doesn't, I practice all areas of intellectual property. It might be a protected, you might be able to protect a brand with a trademark. You might be able to protect creative writing and advertising and video and books and articles with a copyright. But if you want a patent, and this, we're going to focus primarily on patent questions today. If you want a patent, your idea has to fit one of these 4 categories. So that's the first step. That's the first thing to check for patentability. Now, if your idea fits one of these 4 categories, then there's something else to check for, and I'll get to that as well. I'm going to put this up here because I might be coming back to this in a moment. But these are the 4 categories for patentable subject matter. Now, if you have patentable subject matter, what you need next, you have to fit these 3 requirements. The first one is novelty. Second is utility. And I'm going to explain what each of these are in a second. And the third requirement is non-obviousness. So you've got to have novelty, utility, non-obviousness, not necessarily in that order. A lot of times you'll see utility, novelty, non-obviousness. Novelty is that your idea has to be new. Oftentimes in my practice, I'm contacted by inventors that might see something in a foreign country that they think would do phenomenal in the United States. And they want to know if they can import the idea and get a patent for it in the United States. The answer is no. Patents are not for importers of new ideas. They're for inventors. So it has to be an original new idea, and that's novelty. Now, utility. The idea has to be useful, which the patent office is not going to get into the merits of whether an idea is actually useful. They're not going to look at, say, the Rubik's Cube and make a judgment on whether this is a good game or an interesting game or something that the world needs. That's not their job. By utility, basically, does the idea do what it purports to do? If it does, then it meets the utility requirement for patentability. And then finally, non-obviousness. Even if your idea is new, and this is what a lot of people are confused by, that even if the idea is new, you can't necessarily get a patent just because it's new if a patent examiner believes that the idea is obvious. So we might come back to this one. Let me just put it up right here. So now you've got the 4 categories: machine, article of manufacture, composition of matter, or a process. And then your idea has to meet the novelty, utility, and non-obviousness standard. And if you meet those, then you can then proceed with pursuing a patent. Now, the patent examiner is going to look at novelty, utility, and non-obviousness as well. and make a decision. So that's where a good patent attorney will be able to advise you, not just if your idea is new, but if it's enough of a change over what's already out there to be seen as non-obvious. Now, what are some obvious variations? There might be times when these things are not obvious variations, but some clear ones that you want to be suspectful of is color. If all you're changing is the color of a product, unless that color is overcome some obstacle in manufacturing or provides some really unique difference, color is not considered a non-obvious change. The second is shape. So if we're talking about a utility patent, the changing the shape, generally, if something's rectangular and you say your idea is square, you have to find some advantage to it being square, and you have to find a reason why it's a non-obvious change, why it would not be obvious to take that same component that's rectangular and make it square. So you've got some hurdles if all you're changing is color, shape, and of course, size. So if you have an idea that you think is already out there, but you have been able to produce it much smaller or much larger, that in itself is an obvious variation, unless you can show that there's some difficulty in meeting the size requirement. An example of that would be originally there's a huge challenge with hearing aids to create the components small enough so that they would fit within the auditory canal. In that case, size could be considered a non-obvious difference, but generally it is not. So terrific question. Unfortunately, it's an easier question to ask than to answer, like what is patentable, but those are the things you're looking at. Before I go forward though, I just want to just clarify that not all ideas have to be complicated in order to get a patent. Like there's some really simple ideas. That's some examples here. A Post-it note, for example, incredibly simple, simply paper with removable glue. There's nothing highly complex about it, but it's a patented idea by 3M and makes over $1 billion in profit per year. So you don't have to have complexity. Another item that is commonly understood, and people are surprised when they find out that there's a patent on this sleeve. So the simple cardboard sleeve that goes onto a cup of coffee so that your fingers don't get too hot, that's patentable subject matter and can be protected. So don't look at, there's no requirement. If you remember the requirements we have up here, machine, article, composition of matter, and process, nowhere in that list does it say flux capacitor or rocket science or there's no complexity requirement. And the other requirements of novelty, utility, and non-obviousness, there's no requirement for complexity. Sometimes simple ideas are protectable. One last example, and that's Ron Brown is the inventor of this container combined with a label. And you might say there's nothing unique about this label. Well, there is. The label is placed on the container upside down. And what that does, the human mind is not comfortable with seeing lettering upside down. So the natural inclination is to take this and turn it around. And when you store it in your cabinets, you store it this way, which has that advantage that the ketchup, you don't have to hit the bottle to get the ketchup out. Phenomenal idea, extremely simple, and it's a combination of 3 different items. And that's taking the container that's squeezable. I'm going to hold it up and you can tell this is not glass, so it does squeeze. So that's one component. A label that's reversed to encourage people not to store it in this configuration, but to store it upside down. And then finally, the third is to have a leak-proof nozzle so that if it's upside down, it doesn't just spill all over the place. So you can tell these 3 components in combination also constitute patentable subject matter. And this is a big miss by a lot of inventors, because they'll see that, for example, idea A is already out there. Idea B is already out there, and idea C is not new either. So when you have these three ideas, neither one of them are patentable on their own because they've already been patented. But the inventor that takes three known ideas and combines them in a new, useful, and non-obvious way together, they're the ones that will get the patent. That's what Ron Brown did with his bottle. He took three ideas that separately already existed. The label existed, the squeezable container existed, and the special nozzle existed. He took them in a unique configuration, combined them together, and was able to get a patent on his idea. That, by the way, he was able to sell for $13 million. So it's not complexity that's the overriding factor when you're trying to apply for a patent.